Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Mike Westfall here at McDonald Garden Center. Today we're going to talk about why fall is the best time to plant. So you've probably heard that a lot. Why is fall the best time to plant? Why are people kind of bringing this about and why are people talking about it, especially here in the Hampton Roads area? And that is because we're in a transition zone. So, you go much further south, you've kind of got a year-long planting season. You go much farther north, you kind of are a little bit tighter into when your planting season is. But here in the Hampton Roads area, we've got a very unique environment in the fact that we're kind of in between the two. So we're not pure south, we're not pure north, we're kind of in between, and that means we've got pretty much a year-long time to plant, but we can kind of rate our planting times and say, hey, this is kind of the best time to plant, and fall has always been one of the best times to plant. And so the cool weather has come, everybody wants to kind of get back outside, everybody loves the summer, wants to get outdoors in the summer, but you start to say, I don't want to work too hard. And gardening can be hard work sometimes. It can be easy as well. We can do them both ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. But as the weather cools down, you might say to yourself, it's a great time for me to get back out in the yard and do a couple things or maybe tackle a big project. So why do we always talk about fall? Why is fall the best time to plant? Why do people say fall is for planting? And so there's a lot of reasons really, and we can run through them very, very quickly so that you can kind of understand the basics as to why fall is the best time, as well as some of the how to plant and what to do when you're planting in the garden or in a container. But fall is a great time to plant for multiple reasons. And some of the easy ones are rain. So we get typically a lot of rain. Now, here in the Hampton Roads area in 2022, we didn't get a ton of rain in September, but we finally just got some rain. And so finally, we can start to dig in our soil. And October and November are one of the best prime time to plant seasons. And so it's a great time to get out in the yard, whether you're doing it in containers or in the landscape. We typically get more rain this time of the year. Now, what's also good is plants don't need as much water in the fall. So that's the other reason that I kind of put that picture of rain and talk about rain. Rain is natural watering, right? And so what we like to do is if you have to water your plants, which you might have to. I mean, we're going to say, hey, look, if you plant a shrub, you're going to want to water for the first 2 to 3 weeks, about 2 to 3 times a week. So it's kind of an easy way to kind of remember it. But we don't have to water as heavily, as aggressive, because as the fall season approaches, cooler weather, we don't have as much evaporation, we don't have as much, of that sun impact, which is why I wanted to talk about the sun as well. The sun is starting to go, shorter days in the fall. The sun is getting further away from where we are. And so it's going further kind of in the skyline and it's getting kind of further away. And so we don't have as harsh of sun. That noon time frame, the sun isn't directly over us, which is why the temperatures start to cool down. But what that means for plants is they can take it easy a little bit. Now, your plants aren't going to grow super aggressively. There are some plants that will grow in this cooler weather. You'll see it a lot with like heuchera, coral bells, hellebores will start to put out some growth. You'll start to see a little pump of new growth here and there on a couple different plants, but a lot of plants are kind of going dormant. I mean, I talk about pansies all the time in the fall. Pansies will grow. Mums are going to bloom because of the shorter days. There's things that are happening in the garden. But for the majority of plants, trees and shrubs and even perennials and even some annuals, they're starting to kind of go into that relaxing time frame where they're kind of starting to get dormant, and the sun impacts that. The sun is kind of saying, hey, I'm getting further away, the days are getting shorter, I'm not going to be as harsh on you, and so it's a great time for your plants to kind of relax a little bit. And I mentioned dormancy, so plants are going to start to go into their dormant period, where some plants aren't always dormant. So let's talk about evergreen and deciduous for a minute. Evergreens, I think a lot of people think when we say the term evergreen that it's a conifer. It's a pine, or it's a arborvitae, or it's a spruce, juniper, all of these different types of conifers. Well, there are broadleaf evergreens as well. Think of some of your hedge plants like a chindoviburnum, a ligustrum, a wax myrtle, magnolia. So, I mean, some of the evergreen magnolias, those are evergreen. So some plants will hold on to their leaves throughout the entire winter season, which means that they're producing food for themselves. They're still going through photosynthesis, they're still absorbing carbon dioxide, they're still releasing oxygen, all of those great things. They're still pulling nutrients out of the soil, they're still doing things. They're just not actively growing new growth. They're not putting out new growth. So they are kind of in that dormant stage, that relaxing time frame, but they are still producing food for themselves. But some of the bigger trees like oaks and maples and river birch, and then of course a lot of some of the shrubs too, like roses or butterfly bush, as they begin to kind of drop their leaves, they're taking that food source and storing it in their root system. So it's a really kind of cool way to kind of think about what are your plants. I always like to try and put myself into my, kind of a plant mode and say, all right, if I'm a plant, what am I doing right now? And what do I need right now? Or what do I not need right now? So it's kind of good to kind of think like a plant sometime. But those are three really important factors. Rain, we usually get more of it in the fall. If we don't get more of it, you will have to water. Definitely going to have to water new plantings always, but you won't have to water as much as you would if you were planting in the summer, of course. And then, of course, the sun is a little bit lower in the sky, so it's not as harsh, and plants are beginning to go dormant. So the next one is really why I think fall is the best time to plant, and that is because root growth. So this is when roots grow. So typically that's why we recommend planting in the fall, is because root growth occurs in the fall season. Remember what I just said where I mentioned the plants are producing food for themselves, especially the deciduous plants. And they're going to store it in their root system to survive through the winter season. And they do that because they work very aggressively during the summer, spring, summer, and into fall. And now as the leaves start to change color and they start to drop, it's a good time for all that food to get stored in the root system, and that's when root systems explode. And so when you plant something in the fall, then you get lots and lots of root growth, as you can see from these images. And that's why that's why I put this grass image in there, because a lot of people plant lawns right now. So the lawn is a great thing to do in the fall season because it's when roots develop. It's when fescue really likes to grow. So I'm kind of specifically talking about fescue. Again, we're in that weird kind of transition zone where we can do lots of different types of grasses. But fescue is when what we would recommend planting fescue is in the fall season. Spring's a little bit trickier because summer's coming faster. So we like to get a nice, good, deep root system developed, and that's what grows in the fall season. So one of the major reasons that we always recommend planting in the fall is for root growth. And then one of my favorite reasons is we've got to go through fall, through winter, through spring to get to summer, right? Summer can be some of the harshest times on our plants. The Hampton Roads area is tricky. I mentioned we're not the South, we're not the North, but man, do we get hot and we can get cold. So we're kind of in that weird area where we can get kind of the best of both worlds. But the summers can be hot and humid, and they can be dry, or they could be wet. Both can cause problems. But the summer is the time that some plants really do thrive in. You think of like your tropicals, hibiscus, and a lot of annuals that are going to really thrive in that heat and humidity. But then there's a lot of plants here that maybe struggle a little bit in that time frame. So if we can plant something in the fall, it can go all the way through the fall, all the way through the winter, all the way through the spring before summer hits. So what that means is you're giving it the longest amount of time before the harshest weather comes on that plant. And this is kind of really in that trees and shrubs and perennials world. So trees and shrubs and perennials are plants that you're going to plant and enjoy year after year after year. Annuals you're going to plant annually, so we don't have to worry too much about the seasonality of it other than when do we plant them. But trees and shrubs and perennials are going to be in the ground, and most of the plants, at least that you purchase from us at McDonald Garden Center, are going to be able to take the winter temperatures. We don't typically sell a whole lot of barely winter hardy plants. If we do, we're going to kind of put it in the annual category. A great example would be lantana. We all love lantana. Miss Huff lantana is one of our proven perennial lantanas. Now, even some people have struggled with those, but that is one of our most proven ones. All the rest of the lantanas we carry as an annual. But there are some kind of weird ones in there. You might throw like palm trees in there. Like say, okay, a palm, is not going to love our winter temperatures. It's going to love our summer temperatures. But for the majority of the trees, shrubs, and perennials that we sell here, a lot of them are going to love the winter season, so you don't have to worry about the winter as much. What you got to worry about in the winter is keeping your plants mulched, making sure that they're happy, making sure that they've had a long time to kind of get a little bit established before winter hits. So specifically, if you're talking about palms or lantana, you're probably planting those in the summer and maybe early fall season so that they can get established before the winter hits. But for a majority of the plants, you can plant them all the way through the fall, winter, and into the spring, of course. Now, what I do kind of want to say at this point is you might come up with some projects, and this is kind of always the tricky part about being your do-it-yourself kind of gardener is there's a lot of seasonality to all of the plants. There are certain plants that we won't get in the fall and we'll only get in the spring. And that's because we have to show plants in their fullest kind of glory. So, you think about hydrangeas. Hydrangeas bloom in the summer. So, late spring, early summer. And so when are you going to get the best selection? In that time frame. You can still get hydrangeas, you can still do some of these projects, but I do kind of caution people to say, hey, get done what you can get done, but if you can't get every single plant that you want, it's okay. We can tackle some bigger projects in the fall, we can do some bigger mass plantings in the fall, and then okay, we got to fill some holes in the spring when there's more availability. That's just the nature of the business. We're not going to carry plants that don't have leaves on them very much, or that bloom in the fall. We're not going to carry mums in the spring. Mums bloom in the fall, so that's when you're going to get your mums. So if you want to plant mums in your garden, then or in your landscape, then you have to get them in the fall. Great time to plant them. And most of the time, those plants that you're getting in those time frames are going to actually do pretty well being planted that time frame. But if I were going to rate the months to plant in, fall would be my number one, spring would definitely be my number two, and it's a very close number two. I mean, it's almost a number one because of the selection that you're going to get. Winter would be number three, and summer would be number four. Now, summer is close to number three because summer you're going to get a bigger selection of different things too that maybe you didn't have in the winter. So kind of a tricky scenario. What I always tell people is go to your garden centers as much as you possibly can. Of course, I would say that. I work at a garden center. We want to see you. We want you to come in. But it's really true. If you're trying to do a pollinator garden or a butterfly garden or a hummingbird garden or something kind of specific or a ever-blooming garden, let's say you want to do something like your, a cut flower garden. So you always want something to be blooming, then you're going to need to visit your garden center every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, so that you can get kind of all those plants blooming at the specific times that you want them, because that's when the garden centers are going to carry them. So whether you're in our neck of the woods or Karen and the Outer Banks, you can come up and see us. But if you're in our neck of the woods, then you definitely want to come and check us out at least every month to just kind of see what's new, so that you can kind of plant something different and kind of build out your landscape, build out your flower beds. So that you get something blooming throughout the year, if that's something that you're interested in. Or low maintenance. We'll carry certain low maintenance plants throughout the years, or throughout the seasons. So it's kind of important to kind of keep that in mind, but fall is a great time to plant because more rain, cooler temperatures, it's not as harsh on the plant, the sun has kind of gone down a little bit, some plants are starting to go dormant, root growth occurs, and we've got the longest time before summer hits. So it's a great time to get out in the yard and plant. Now, here I want to talk about just some of the planting basics, because hopefully I've convinced you to plant something this fall. And if you do, there's a couple things that you need to do. So I always go through this whenever I talk about planting, which is if you're planting directly in our soil, if you're planting right in the ground, then you need to amend our soil. So our soil might look like this, right? Kind of clay-based, kind of gnarly looking, not amazing. Some people have great soil, some people have, poor soil, some people have sandy soil. But typically we have kind of a clay-based, kind of poor-looking soil. And so when you're going and planting in that, you want to amend it. And I amend every single time I plant in the ground. It's just better to add nutrients. And one of the most important ways to get nutrients and get organic matter, which you'll always hear gardeners talk about organic matter. Whether you're talking about the lawn or your flower beds, a vegetable garden, organic matter is what is kind of the lifeblood of a good soil. And that's compost. So compost is that dark, rich looking stuff over there. You can get lots and lots of different types of compost. We've got a great one, our McDonald compost, but you can get cow manure. You can get lots and lots of different types of compost. Mushroom compost is super popular. So those are composts that will break down in your soil, enriching it, and add organic matter. Now, that's not the only thing you need to add. You also need to add perlite. Perlite is what's up there in that corner. There's those little white styrofoam looking balls that you see in potting soils, but you can buy perlite just by itself. And then you can use that mix it with the compost, mix it with your native soil. So what we recommend is a third of your soil, a third of perlite, and a third of compost. So all of those being a third, basically what I do, dig a hole, move my soil off to the side, take a shovel, put a shovel scoop full of compost in, a scoop of perlite, mix it all up, and then I backfill with that. So it's pretty simple. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll get a wheelbarrow if I'm planting 10 or 15 shrubs. I'll get a wheelbarrow together, I'll put my compost in there, put my perlite in there, mix it up. I've got a mix, I dig my hole, I throw a shovel full or two into that pile of soil that I've got, or sprinkle it around the hole, and then I'll mix it up as I plant it and put it back into the hole. It's a great way to amend your soil. Amend your hole every single time, whether you're planting annuals, perennials, or trees and shrubs, because over time it'll make all your soil great. Now you can go kind of bigger and you can say, hey, I'm gonna go and amend this entire flower bed, or I'm gonna do a vegetable garden. I wanna amend this entire vegetable garden. It's a great way to do it. It's a little bit more work. It's going to need a little bit more compost, a little bit more perlite, but we can get you all of those numbers and help you figure that out. You let us know the square footage and we can figure out exactly what you need. But what you would do there is you pour it over the top and you till it into your soil. And that's another option for you as well. I like to amend each hole because eventually I'm going to probably plant something over all of my soil. So it's a great way to kind of amend each soil hole. Now, if you're not planting in a hole, then you're going to want to use potting soil. So if you're using a container, you've got to use potting soil. You do not want to use potting soil in the ground. And the reason is any good quality potting soil is going to have a wetting agent. And wetting agents are what are kind of designed to kind of hold moisture in, but also keep the soil kind of moving and flowing. And what that means is if I were to take a potting soil and eliminate the wetting agent, if I didn't water it for a while, then that is going to become very hard and almost like brick-like. And that's not good for plants. So a wetting agent helps keep that soil a little bit more moist and also help keep it kind of movable and flowable. And then of course, potting soils are going to have compost, peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, all of those great things in there. So basically all of the things that you're adding into a hole minus the wetting agent. But make sure you're using a very good high quality potting soil when you're planting in containers. We've got a couple great ones here at McDonald Garden Center. We've got our all-purpose potting soil, our McDonald organic potting soil, and then we've got a bunch of other ones too. We've got some of the black golds, we got some Espoma potting soils, we got Fox Farms. There's so many choices when it comes to potting soils these days. And they're all great. If we carry them, we definitely believe in them. And then if you are planting anywhere, use Biotone Starter. So I mentioned root growth. Root growth is extremely important to a plant. We need to invest as much into the soil, into the plant's home. That is where it's living. That's where it's living and breathing and getting nutrients. We need to invest into the root system of a plant just as much as we invest in the plant. So if I go buy, a $100 tree, I might need to invest $50 to $100 into the soil, into its home. Because I know that's going to help it survive over the long haul. And Biotone Starter is a great investment. It is absolutely amazing. It used to be back in the day we would do root stimulators, and root stimulators still have their purpose in place, but Biotone Starter for most of your trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, vegetable gardens is absolutely amazing. And the reason why is because not only is it a light starter fertilizer, it's higher in phosphorus, it helps you kind of get your root system going, but it also has beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizae. And these are kind of the new thing that we're finding out that are in organic, really healthy soils. And if they're in there and they get right to the root system of the plant, so you got to use this at the time of planting, then they can live with the plant the entire lifespan of that plant. They basically form a symbiotic relationship. The mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria give the plant what they need, and they take away from the plant what the plant doesn't want. And so it's a great relationship. It's occurring naturally in nature, but this is a great way to make sure that it happens with your plants. And like I said, it can last the entire lifetime of the plant. And you're gonna see results. If you plant one plant without it and one plant with it, you will see the results. It gets bigger, faster, easier. It doesn't need as much watering. It has less failure rate. So you're gonna really love Biotone Starter. I recommend getting an 18-pound bag and just always having it around the house so that I can use it whenever I plant anything, whether it's in a container or in the landscape, wherever I plant anything. If I can get it to the root system, I'm going to use it because it's amazing what the results are. So Irene, hi, watching from Virginia Beach. Great to see you. And then lastly, green leaf. Green leaf is our plant food. Doesn't have to be green leaf. We carry lots of different types of plant foods, but it's a great thing to think about in the fall season as well, is feeding our plants. Because as I mentioned, a lot of these plants are going to have to live throughout the winter time frame, and we don't typically feed in the winter here. So things like pansies that love to grow, whether we have a warm week in the middle of January, they'll be putting out new blooms and growing. Those plants are heavy feeders. They need plant food pretty consistently. Somewhere around every 5 to 6 weeks, you're going to want to feed your pansies. But there's other plants that you probably wouldn't think about, like hydrangeas that are going dormant, butterfly bush that are going dormant, some of your trees, Japanese maples, things that you kind of really treasure. You want to make sure they've got the food source to last through the winter. A great example is if you've planted a St. Augustine zoysia Bermuda lawn. You'd want to put down a winterizer plant food, lawn food. What that will do is basically protect the root system through the winter season. These are southern grasses. We're kind of in that transition zone. I've mentioned that a bunch of times, but it's a great way to kind of protect your plants, and potassium is a great way to protect your plants. Whenever you look at your label on your plant foods, there's going to be 3 numbers. It's your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. NPK is what they talk about, NPK ratio. Don't worry about that so much. What I always tell people, especially beginners, is think about it like this: up, down, all around. So the first number is nitrogen, that's upward growth, that's green growth. The second one is phosphorus, that's down, that's root growth. And then the last one is potassium, that's all around. That's kind of your protector. So NPK ratios are kind of important, but we can help you through all of that. So let us know what you're planning on feeding, and we can get you the right food and tell you the right time. But fall is a great time to feed your plants, especially if they've had a hard, summer, which we didn't have the easiest summer in 2022. But definitely kind of, make sure that your plants are getting fed properly, and then we want to do it. So typically spring and fall are really the best times. I like to try and get one in the summer, but definitely spring and fall are my 2 kind of major times to feed plants that are established. But even plants that I newly plant, I usually use Biotone starter, and then about 3 to 4 weeks, I come back through with the green leaf and use that to plant. Or use that to feed. So it's a great way to kind of help that root system develop and help those plants make sure they can survive and have the food that they need to get through the winter months. All right, next one is planting a plant in the ground. This is always a tricky one, especially for beginners. I know when I first started, I buried way too many plants, and so that's typically what I talk about, is don't bury your plants. And I think this diagram helps kind of explain that. If you ever buy a tree or a shrub from us, you'll get a warranty card that has a diagram just like this on there. But basically what you want to do is make sure that that top of that root ball is above grade, or slightly or right with the grade. I typically don't like to go right with the grade because most plants settle a little bit. Most of these potting soil root balls that have, it's a root ball with lots of soil around it, they can settle over time and they can drop down another inch or so. So I always like to be about an inch or 2 above the regular grade. And you can kind of see that here with that slope right there. It kind of slopes up and comes back down. So what we want to do is we want to dig our hole at least twice as wide, maybe 3 times as wide, but dig it basically wide enough so that you can backfill easily. You don't want to be, you don't want to dig your hole this big and then put a root ball that's this big right inside it. So you've only got an inch of space to kind of cram soil, your amended soil around it. You really want to dig your hole nice and wide. I usually like that kind of bowl shape hole. It helps me kind of work the soil in, gives my feeder roots a little bit more space to run out into, and my deeper roots can start to work into its native soil. As I mentioned, we want to amend our soil, so we want to keep our native soil, our perlite, and our compost mix right around the root ball, but we want to use that native soil because it needs to get used to it. Eventually, this plant is going to grow outside of that area, potentially, of where we've planted or where we've amended the soil. So we've got to use that native soil, so when it does come out of that space that we've planted in, then the roots are used to that soil. They're not going to hit it and think it's a wall. That can sometimes happen if we're not careful and if we use just a really, really good soil. So if we use compost, a topsoil, and a perlite mix and took out our native soil, what can happen sometimes is that root ball, when it hits that wall, it can act like a wall. and it can sit there and it'll wrap its roots, and then 10, 15 years down the road, that tree or shrub may go on us because the roots have kind of constricted itself. So we need to make sure we're getting it used to its native soil. So don't eliminate your soil, use your soil, just amend your soil. Plant it nice and level or just above level. 1 to 2 inches above grade is typically what I recommend. And then when you mulch, don't mulch up around the trunk. Basically that trunk where it goes into the ground or goes into that root ball is a very, very kind of specific spot. It's there for a reason. It's been growing that way. Let's not change it. Let's not add a bunch of soil to the top of the root ball. Mulching is fine. We're adding soil around the root ball. We want the roots to grow out. And if you put a bunch of mulch or soil up around the trunk of that tree or shrub or perennial, then it's going to try and grow roots out, and it's really going to struggle. It's trying to do something that it's not ever had to do. And so don't force it to do something that it's not used to doing. And it really can harm the tree, especially trees, where you put it right up to the bark or the trunk of the tree. You might see those, what we call mulch volcanoes that build up around trees. Those are bad for trees because moisture gets around that bark. It'd be like sticking your hand in a tub of water for weeks and weeks and weeks because it never has time to dry out. It's going to start to rot. Now trees try to combat that by sending roots out and saying, okay, can I beat this? Can I make this more of my top of my plant? But the problem is typically the problem has already occurred and that rot is starting to set in. And when it starts to get into the bark, it is really, really tough for that plant to kind of kick out of it. So make sure when we plant something, we're planting it level or just above grade, never below grade. Below grade, more soil is going to compact over the top of it. It's going to start to sink. It's going to start to settle. Mulch will kind of build up around the top, and eventually that plant will go. So always plant your shrubs or your trees or your perennials or any plant, annuals. This is a great technique even when you're planting in a container. Make sure that you're planting all your plants at the right height so that the top of the root balls always remain the top of the root ball. It's a very, very important part of planting. All right, so next is, what do you do? What am I going to do? It's fall. What should I do? Well, if you want to start small, then here's a great couple options. You can plant a container, like that one over there to the far right. I've got it right here actually. So that great container, you can plant up containers. If you've got a couple pots that you want to refresh, it's great. It's a great way to start small. If you're not doing any gardening at all, maybe plant up a container for your front porch. You can come and buy one pre-made, or you can make one yourself. Some people like just monochromatic, so you could just take a croton, drop it into a nice terracotta pot, and you're done and you're gardening. So that's kind of the fun of it. You can take it up a notch and you can start to do maybe some fall decorations that incorporate plants. Like something like this is our fall decorating package where you get a bale of wheat straw, a corn stalk, 2 mums, and a pumpkin. And so with that, you get everything that you need and you're still got some plants in there. And you're adding color with pumpkins, which you don't have to water and maintain. But the mums you'll want to water, and you'll start to kind of learn how to deal with some of those things. And you'll love the fall season because you have to do less watering, like I mentioned, and it's less harsh on the plant. So it's a great time to get into gardening if you haven't. And of course, get a house plant. I mean, that's a great thing to do in the fall season because we're starting to maybe start saying, okay, I'm going to start hunkering down at home as it gets colder. So you want to bring some of that life indoors, and plants are a great way. I picked that ZZ plant because I grabbed a ZZ plant here. I absolutely love these, especially for beginner gardeners. It is one of the easiest plants to grow indoors. Super, super tolerant of low light, can take medium light. So you don't have to worry about the light requirement so much. Wet, dry cycle, very, very easy to take care of this gorgeous plant. I love that structure, that habit, and we have a nice little crop in right now. So it's a really, really good time to get ZZ plants, but really, really nice plant. And there's a ton of different options for you. I always tell people when they come into the garden center, think about some of the things that you have around your home. What kind of windows you have, what direction do they face? Are they facing east, west, north, south? Those are some of the answers or some of the questions that we'll ask. And if you have the answers, we can get you the plants right then and there. You can also go around and say, hey, I want a tall plant. I need something that gets 6 to 7 feet tall. I want to really fill in this corner. Or I just need something, a low bowl for a coffee table. There's lots and lots of options for you. And it's a great way to start getting into gardening is with houseplants. And we have probably the biggest selection in Hampton Roads, so you got to come and check it out, and that's year round. I mean, our selection has been amazing. It's absolutely gorgeous, the types of houseplants that we have. Now, you can also go big, right? So we can go and do, if you're a weekend warrior or you got a big project that you're going to tackle this whole fall season, it's a great time to do some of those. It's a great time to kind of get a vegetable garden established. Fall gardening is really, really good when we talk about cole crops. Spinach, lettuce, turnips, beets, carrots, the list goes on and on. Onions, garlic, there's so many things that you can do. The tomato, cucumber, watermelon, zucchini, squash season is kind of done, and now we're getting into the easier season. I love cole crops. They're very, very easy. So whether you're a beginner or you're thinking about just designing a big raised bed, a bigger edible garden, going to be very, very popular here next year. So definitely make sure that we're kind of getting ready for that season because we want to grow our own food. If that's important to you, it's a great time to get into it. Fall, cooler, cole crops, very easy to grow. I'm saying cole, C-O-L-E, because a lot of people call them cold crops, which is perfectly fine because they love the cold or cooler weather. Spinach and lettuce will grow all the way through the winter season, typically without missing a beat. You can also throw in a couple herbs as well. Parsley works really, really well in the cooler months. Sage, things like that. So you got lots and lots of options of growing an edible garden and beginning to get ready for your summer season. A lot of people love the summer season. I love the fall season for edible gardening because it's very easy, it's extremely rewarding, and it's just simple to start. You can do it from seeds, you can do it from starter plants. There's lots and lots of great options for a fall edible garden. Now, you could also spruce up your patio with adding containers or fixing up some containers that you already have. If you've got a patio and you don't have any kind of pottery on it filled with plants, then you're missing out. And so definitely it could be a big project if we start to talk about maybe filling up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 containers with more plants for the fall. If you got begonias, I grabbed this picture because it's got mandevilla, it's got some different types of plants that maybe aren't gonna make it much further. Maybe you're gonna bring them in your garage and try and protect them during the winter months, but maybe you're gonna toss them. It's a great time to start to think about that. Fill it in with some pansies, some Swiss chard, maybe a conifer, maybe an autumn rocket camellia. There's so many great options to fill up your containers and go big with it. Go big or go home is what I say. If you're starting as a beginner, then start small and just get into it. Get excited about it. And don't worry if you make mistakes. We all do. But if you're into it, you got a big patio and you want to go big, we can help you go big as well. So, and then of course, the last thing is mass it out. It's my best advice that I can give you, whether you're planting pansies like this, is go big in the landscape. If you've got a landscape and you want to highlight an area, plant 50 pansies. It's going to be better than planting 50 pansies all around your yard. Plant them in a mass somewhere. Find a big focal point. Bring that eye to a specific point. So maybe you've got a landscape that wraps around the whole front, or you've got the whole front of your house. Instead of scattering those pansies out all the way around, maybe bring them a little bit closer to the door. Create a swale, create some curvature. Start to layer those pansies a little bit. It'll allow you to try different colors, but also you can just do all one color and mass it out and go big. And that applies to all of landscape. Whenever I talk about landscape design, or anything that I'm doing, I'm always trying to group plants. Instead of planting one of this or one of this or one of that, those are specimen plants. I'll plant one Japanese maple because I want you to focus on that, but around it, I might plant 10 azaleas or 10 hollies or 10 boxwoods because that's kind of that mass appeal. You start to let them grow into each other, they start to fill in your landscape, and that is what will help guide your eye. You can put curves in things when you do that. It's a little bit easier to work when it's starting to start to do this mass planting. It's a great opportunity for you to really build out your landscape and really help guide the eye. That's the important part of landscape design, is guiding the eye around. Fronts of the house, you typically want to guide your eye to the front door. That's what you're trying to tell people is, hey, this is where you enter, this is welcome, this is my welcome center. And so that's kind of what you're kind of trying to do with your landscape. In the backyard, it's where are you standing? Where are you enjoying? Are you enjoying your patio? Are you standing at your kitchen sink looking out your back window? Maybe there's a bird feeder you want to highlight. Maybe there's a fountain. Maybe there's a shed. Maybe there's a swing set. Who knows? It could be 100 different things that you're trying to kind of guide your eye. And curves help that, and mass plantings help that for sure. So definitely a great way to kind of get into it is go big or go home, as I say. So definitely a great opportunity, and fall is a great time to do that because of all the benefits of planting in fall. So I hope you all enjoyed this. This was a great time to kind of talk about why fall is the best time to plant. It's a really, really good time to come into the garden center. Things are changing rapidly. We're getting lots and lots of different plants in. You can even plant bulbs. I didn't even mention bulbs. but it's a great time to plant bulbs. You know, a lot of people come in the spring and they see the daffodils and the tulips blooming everywhere and they say, oh, I want daffodils and tulips and I want to get the bulbs. Well, you missed it. It's now. So plant them now. So if you're thinking about garlic or onions, you can do that now as a vegetable bulb. But if you're thinking about your spring blooming bulbs, mass out daffodils and tulips. They're super easy to grow. We've got great varieties. You can get big bags, you can get small bags. You can do them in the bottom of your containers if you got a small space. Plant some pansies in a bowl. You know, plant some pansies like this into a container and then put some bulbs underneath it and they'll shoot up through in the spring and they'll bloom and they're absolutely amazing. So it's a great thing. The fall season. It is one of my favorite times to get out in the yard and get in the garden. It is so much fun. The cooler weather, you can put some long sleeves on, you can put some pants on and get out and work in the yard. And it's just a great time to do it. Less watering, less requirements, easier, more successful. So get out there and try it this fall season. And we hope to see you here at the Garden Center this fall. I hope you all enjoyed this. Let me know if you got any questions. And if not, we will take off and I'll see you next time. Thanks everybody.